Shalom and welcome to the ICEJ webinar series. I'm David Parsons, Senior Vice President and Spokesman for the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, coming to you from our TV studios here in the capital of Israel. And today we're going to talk about the high stakes visit of President Trump here to the Middle East. And our special guest is Chris Mitchell. He's the Bureau Chief for CBN News here in Jerusalem and in the Middle East. And so glad to have you with us, Chris.
Great to be with you, David.
All right. Hope you're fine. Hope the family's fine. And
yeah, so family's fine. And I'm not too far away from you in the capital of Israel.
Yeah.
Just about a 10-minute drive away, I think.
Yeah. You're in your studio, where I'm in mine, and we're going to have to start visiting. But we're recording a day early here because of our schedules. But President Donald Trump is in the middle of his visit. It's his first sort of official diplomatic junket. He did go to Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis, but here he is, his first official trip, taking it to Saudi Arabia and to Qatar and then United Arab Emirates. He already finished up in Riyadh, heading for Doha now. He's already landed there as we're recording, and then he'll be in Abu Dhabi tomorrow. And Chris, there's a lot at stake in this visit. How would you sort of shape it up, the context of when he's visiting now and all the, the main things that we're facing?
Well, what a question and what a trip with so many news headlines to report on. I was doing a update today, and there was so much news in President Trump's speeches. First of all, these huge economic deals, $600 billion, maybe up to potentially $1 trillion. There was a $142 billion arms deal between the U.S. And Israel. One of the things, and we've talked about this, David, is the context of how this visit is taking place. We know that the U.S. struck an independent deal with the Houthis just about 2 weeks ago to stop rocket fire on shipping in the Red Sea. It did not include Israel. And you, like myself, probably last night and early this morning, there was sirens here in Jerusalem where the Houthis again fired ballistic missiles. Thankfully, they were both intercepted, but that's just a continuing threat that Israel faces. Also, the Iranian nuclear talks continue between the U.S. and Iran. And there has been this sense, I think, here in Israel, what is the U.S. doing that seems to preclude Israel and leave Israel a little bit out of the loop? The U.S. Trump administration would like to see the Gaza war maybe ended rather than later. All this while Israel is really on the cusp of a major offensive to end the war in Gaza once and for all, and Lord willing, try to free all of the hostages. So, but to the speech, to what happened yesterday, David, first of all, you have this economic deal, just massive billions of dollars, up to $1 trillion. Then you had this hope, at least by President Trump, that Saudi Arabia would join the Abraham Accords, and whether or not that would require the recognition of a Palestinian state. But he leave it all up to Syria. This is in a time of your choosing. So I think that was something that he left the door open. He also met with the new president of Syria, al-Shara, and its sanctions on that new government and asked them to be part of a Abraham Accord. So many things happening almost on a daily basis or hourly basis here.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of it all, but there's a lot of balls in the air. And I admit, we talked earlier this week when we talked about having you on this week, I was a little concerned that Israel had been left out of the loop recently. They didn't know there was direct talks between the U.S. and Iran on the nuclear program. They didn't know anything about this ceasefire with the Houthis or the direct talks between a U.S. envoy, this Adam Boehler, and Hamas, which is historic. The U.S. has never had officially, openly direct talks. And there was a sense, and it was played up, I think, in the Israeli media. I was concerned. I think you shared that. The concern was that you had this huge package of deals. It's up to $1 trillion in trade and investment and arms between the U.S. and the Saudis. The Emiratis are even larger. They've already signed on to a package for $1.4 trillion. And then Qatar, they're throwing in a bunch plus a $400 million luxury jet for Trump. But also present Syria, maybe Lebanon, bringing all these folks together. Let's do the bigger deal of, bringing these countries in on the Abraham Accords. But President Trump, you have to force Israel to accept a Palestinian state and a ceasefire in Gaza with Hamas still living to fight another day. And that, I'm honest, I was worried about that for a couple of days. We put out a prayer alert. And I think God's answering our prayer. I have a lot more confidence and a lot of relief at the first half of this trip, first day and a half so far. You feel the same?
Yeah, I do feel the same, David. I mean, there was reportedly Palestinian Authority President Abbas was going to Riyadh as well, and there may be some sense that there would be a tie with these economic deals to the recognition of a Palestinian state. That did not happen. And then, the other thing a lot of people, and maybe I think surprised people, was the meeting with al-Shara and also the lifting of sanctions on Syria, recognizing that this man used to be called al-Julani, and up to 4 months ago, he had a $10 million bounty on his head, a former al-Qaeda commander. And so the question is, will a leopard at spots? Will this al-Julani, now al-Shara, be a changed man? But it was, I think, to many that saw the requirements that Trump administration is asking of the new government. It's pretty substantial. First of all, they want to join the Abraham Accords, but then they want to send out all foreign terrorists. That may be hard because some of these terrorists have been part of al-Jilani's group when they took over from the Assad regime. Also deport all Palestinians, and demands that are going to be very hard, a high bar, I think, for al-Sharaa to meet if he wants to normal relations with say, the Israel or the U.S.
Yeah, I think the sanctions were imposed because they were not cooperating in the fight against terrorism. They wanted al-Sharaa's cooperation on counterterrorism, and this is going to be a big test. I had Yigal Karmon from Memory, who you know, on about 2 weeks ago. He said, don't trust al-Sharaa. He's not going to change his spots, but it looks like Trump is going to give him a chance. And there does seem to be a messaging, consistent messaging from al-Sharaa that he wants to bring stability to Syria. He's a native Syrian, and maybe he's genuine about it. We shall see. But I just feel a real relief and a real grace, the hand of God over Israel, that this huge deal was facing Trump, kind of like Balaam said, I'll give you, King Balak said, I'll give you money, I'll give prestige, just sell out Israel. And Trump just brushed it away, it seems. He says, you can join the Abraham Accords on your own time, you decide, but I'm not going to force a Palestinian state on Israel. That is essentially what happened yesterday.
Yeah, and you know, if you listen to some of the speeches and the give and take between MBS and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and President Trump, it's a bit like a love feast. There was really quite a warm, cordial atmosphere between the two.
Yeah, they're good buddies. I think Trump has this way of flattering people in order to, do deals with them. But I think MBS is a bit of a charmer himself, and they work well together, it looks like, and it's good to see. This is a lot of money they're talking about, and the Saudis signed on to $600 billion to start with, a quarter of it, like you said, the arms package. But is it going to include F-35s, things that will undermine Israel's qualitative military edge? What do you think?
Well, I know that's a concern of people, and right now you would assume that MBS would be a safe place to have some of these arms, but you never know who would succeed him. And we're not talking about a democracy; we're talking about a monarchy, and those arms in the hands of a future leader of Saudi Arabia may pose a threat to Israel. And as you say, the qualitative edge, that's actually enshrined in American law, that Israel needs to have this qualitative edge over its neighbors, and any of those arms sales to a foreign nation in the region has to meet that criteria. So we'll see what happens. But so far, I think I assume militarily that Israel still has that qualitative edge.
Yeah. And there was also this Saudi request for U.S. help with a nuclear program. How are you reading that issue?
Well, if it's a civilian nuclear program, if it's not for a military nuclear program, there are many countries that do have civilian, nuclear programs, but they cannot produce a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, I'm not sure that would be a threat to Israel or the region. There is concern that it would lead to a nuclear arms race. We'll see. The big thing hanging over the Middle East right now, David, I think, is what is going to happen with Iran's nuclear program. Will these talks succeed? Will they fall apart? Will Donald Trump finally run out of patience with Iran? And in his speech yesterday, he did say he did put a clock on Iran. He didn't have a specific time, but he said the clock is running on Iran to make a decision which way they're going to go. Or he threatened, sanctions that would just decimate Iran's oil production, and bring it down to zero, he said. So that is one threat over Iran. And then he said all options or all actions could be taken, assuming that would mean military action as well, either by Israel or by the U.S. and
Yeah, it's this maximum pressure return to it. And I think the urgent time clock is the fact that Iran is already so close to having weapons grade enriched uranium from 60 to 90%, the big stockpiles they have. It takes a week to do enough for one bomb. So that's why it's such a short time fuse. It looks like there were 4 rounds of talks already, and Witkoff involved in it, between the U.S. and Iran, one of them in Rome, the others in the region. But every time the experts get in the room, it seems the red lines are so far apart, there is no progress.
Yeah, one of the red lines for Iran is that they insist that they have the right to enrich uranium. And, at the very beginning of the talks, it seemed like Steve Witkoff was talking about, well, they can't enrich uranium above 3.67%. They can't enrich it up to weapons-grade uranium. But now it seems like the U.S. has brought that back to, no, they can't have an enrichment program at all. So those are 2 red lines pretty far apart. I would think here in Israel, they're glad that that the sides are so far apart. And I think secretly they'll be waiting, hoping these talks will end and will fall apart, knowing that over decades, Iran has used these negotiations to continue its nuclear program behind the scenes. And they believe that any of this drawing out of the talks by Iran is just simply a way for them to continue getting closer and closer to a nuclear device. So here in Israel, I think they've seen this movie before and they know how it ends. And they're just, I think, waiting for the U.S. to get to the final scene.
Iran already has a nuclear power plant at Bushehr that the Russians bring in the enriched rods, take out the old ones, put the new ones in, then leave, take it back to Russia. And this is the way all the non-nuclear powers, as far as nuclear weapons powers, they all do it. You have a right to that, but you don't have a right to enrich uranium. I think the Saudis, you could probably do that there, but they want to tell Iran that's the way you have to go. It comes in from abroad. You don't enrich it yourself, and it's monitored, and every ounce that's brought in, you have to take it out. So, but how close do you think Israel and even the U.S., where it was mainly Israel, there were reports that Bibi was ready, Netanyahu was ready to send the planes all the way to Iran to attack their nuclear facilities, and Trump stopped him. What kind of credibility do you give all that?
Well, it seemed credible, and I think that was a New York Times article that came out that said actually by mid-May there was a plan in place to go ahead and attack the nuclear site, including commando raids, men on the ground, boots on the ground that would actually assist whatever bombing campaign would take place. I know some people think that leak was designed to actually expose these plans and thwart these plans, that there are some people who would prefer that Israel not make these attacks. So maybe they are credible, but it seemed like there was an attempt anyway to undermine or stop these commando raids and the attack mid-May. We'll see how long that may be delayed, but I think right now the big question in the Middle East, will Israel attack? Will the U.S. and Israel attack this? The window seems like it's a very good window now for Israel, since the air defenses in Iran have been degraded or destroyed. The same thing in Syria. The IDF made sure of that. So it looks like these nuclear sites are vulnerable right now. So when you add that to the fact that Iran's getting closer to weapons-grade uranium, and you have a number of U.S. assets in the region, B-52 bombers, for example, that it seems like the scenario and the circumstances are advantageous, maybe better than they ever have been, to destroy Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah, and thanks to Israel, the big threat of Hezbollah has also been whittled down substantially. It's quite interesting. Trump did make linkage, which the Biden administration refused to do, and the Obama administration, to link Iran, the Ayatollahs, all their bad behavior in the region, the proliferation of weapons, the training of terror militias, the backing of them all over, to make that part of the nuclear talks. And Trump did say, we want to make a deal with Iran, but it has to stop supporting terrorism and these proxy wars, and it can't have nukes. That's a good, solid, clear policy to have, and really plays in Israel's favor too.
Yeah, very much so. And what a change from just a few months ago with the Biden administration. And also Trump makes the point, which is quite a valid point, that, you know, when his first term ended, Iran was nearly bankrupt. And then the Biden administration came in. They either lifted or eased many of the sanctions against Iran, and billions of dollars flowed back into Iran. And that's where they helped support many of their proxy groups, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in the region, and then some of their militias in Iraq and Syria. So it was a market change, and it was really October 7th that really changed things dramatically. As tragic as it was, it led to this year-and-a-half war now that Hamas is nothing like it was. Hezbollah, both in Lebanon and Syria, is nothing what it was, which actually helped lead to the demise of the Assad regime and the rise of al-Sharaa in this new government. So tying those things together makes a lot of sense and makes a big difference.
Yeah, the proliferation of ballistic missiles, this is a problem. It's proven a problem for the whole region, what they've given the Houthis, and you need to make that linkage. And who can forget when the Biden administration lifted sanctions, the news leaked of that private airplane with pallets stacked with cash, dollars on it, hundreds of millions of dollars that flew to Tehran for them in cash, you know, to just hand out, do with whatever they want. That fed the terror regime, the terror network for sure. We got to shift gears, Chris, and talk about Gaza, because look, the Abraham Accords, the big deal isn't happening. The fourth round of Iran, U.S. nuclear talks, they're still kind of stymied and stuck. But the focus now, besides all the big trade deals, can the during Trump's visit, can he get a deal to get more hostages out of Gaza? We just had one out, sort of give us an update on all that.
Yeah, Adan Alexander, the last Israeli-American hostage, was released, and that seemed to be exactly what President Trump wanted to do, probably at least during his Mideast summit, to make sure that every last American hostage was out of there. That seemed to be a deal. One more deal that seemed to leave Israel a bit out of the loop in terms of making sure that it was American and not more Israelis. But I know Steve Witkoff did give a lot of credit to Prime Minister Netanyahu for part of making sure that happened. So right now we have 58 hostages remaining. I believe 20 are still alive. And there is a deal right now as we speak. There are negotiators in Doha, Qatar, to try to strike another deal. I think part of the Witkoff deal is 10 more hostages and for a temporary ceasefire, but not an end to the war. And so the Hamas negotiations was an end to the war and a withdrawal of all IDF troops. And but I don't think Israel or the U.S. will agree to that. And yesterday, David, we know that the IDF targeted, I believe, Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, and trying to decapitate the rest of the Hamas leadership. Reportedly, he was very intransigent about the negotiations and was unwilling to budge. So that could have an impact on the negotiations. And one question is, who would be the next Hamas leader to negotiate with, and whether he'll be as stringent as Sinwar was, or maybe he'll be more accommodating in the negotiations. But all this is happening as we speak, and Lord willing, and there's been so much prayer, so much effort, so much advocacy for all of these hostages to be released, not only here in Israel, but around the world.
Yeah. I think been reporting that there was a lot of pressure on both Israel and Hamas by the U.S., by the Arab mediators, to trying to get a deal before Trump came. At least Hamas, sort of to court his favor, they gave up this Eden Alexander. Mm-hmm. But as Trump is coming into the region, it seems that he's quite fine having the threat of this major IDF operation, Operation Gideon's Chariots, hanging over Hamas right now, because it does put more pressure. That's what Witkoff praised Netanyahu. The interpretation or analysis is that the military pressure plus the diplomatic pressure is what got this guy freed. Tell us about Operation Gideon's Chariot and how, the role it's playing right now in the negotiation.
Well, it seems like this new Gideon's Chariots is right on the verge of being operational. I think they're waiting for President Trump to leave the region and to see if there's any, breakthrough in the negotiations. But if not, Gideon's Chariot is going to be an entirely different military strategy against Hamas, unlike the year and a half where there have been special operation raids into certain areas to root out Hamas, but then they would withdraw. Many times Hamas would go back into that particular area, and the IDF would have to go back into it. Somebody described it to us as sort of whack-a-mole, but this is going to change. And the change is, when they take over area, they're going to control that area. And I think they have 3 divisions of reservists that will go in, and when they take over an area, they will control it, they will not leave, and then they will continue to squeeze Hamas into smaller and smaller area to, first of all, defeat Hamas, and secondly, Lord willing, to put enough pressure on Hamas to release the remaining hostages. So that may go into effect in just a few days after President Trump leaves the region. And it's the hope of many that this could bring the war finally to an end after more than a year and a half.
Chris, I tell you, last weekend we went on Friday up to the Galilee, and on Highway 6, the main north-south highway, we saw in about 20 minutes to a half hour, we saw 9 different tanks on big trucks being taken south to the Gaza border area from the north. They're taking standing army and armored units and all from the Lebanese-Syrian border, sending them south. So this is a real threat of this Operation Gideon's Chariots. And it seems Trump, on his visit here, he was quite content, quite happy to have the threat of this Israeli operation hanging over Hamas's head, because it really could help bring a hostage deal before he leaves the region on Thursday. And anything else that you want to? Yes. Go ahead.
Very possible that it could lead. That's certainly the hope and the prayer for Israel, that it would lead to a release of all the hostages, including the ones who have died, to bring their remains home for their families. I would say one of the main things, I think, is what you did at the ICEJ, and Jürgen, is send out a prayer alert for believers all over the world. And I think prayer works. I think we're seeing prayer have an impact on these negotiations in Saudi Arabia. And I think it's so important to be continuing to pray for the peace of Israel, the release of the hostages, for wisdom for President Trump as he makes these literally regional and global decisions, and also for Prime Minister Netanyahu, for all of the Israeli leaders to make wise decisions. So, good things can happen. That Hamas could be defeated once and for all, that this threat would be eliminated, that the hostages would be released, and that peace would come to many Israelis who are going through just this horrible ordeal for a year and a half. And you and I live in this sort of atmosphere as well, David. We go through the sirens from Houthi missiles, but believers here and around the world need to continue to pray. It's very, very urgent.
Yes, prayer works. I think we've already seen it in just the last day or two with Trump withstanding all the temptation to sell out Israel. It did not happen. I think we're going to be very proud of this president when it's all over, what he's done for Israel, and he really passed an important test this time. And we've had people praying for 580 some days now, every day, actually a couple online prayer vigils that we're overseeing, and it does work, and we appreciate CBN and all they do to, all you folks do to encourage support for Israel and prayer for Israel. We've been talking to Chris Mitchell, the bureau chief in Jerusalem and the Middle East for the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN News, and so great to see you again. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for all your insights and updates.
Thanks, David. Great to be with you again.
Okay, that's our time for today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. Join us next Thursday, 3 p.m. for our next episode of the ICJ webinar series, giving you a warm shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us today. Join us again next Thursday at 3 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms for more exclusive ICEJ content.
Jerusalem is such an incredible city, called to be a house of prayer for all nations. We've seen this in action over the past 45 years when the Christian Embassy has been bringing Christians from all over the world up to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles based on the vision of Zechariah the prophet, chapter 14, verse 16, that all nations will one day come up to Jerusalem to worship the Lord and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This year's feast theme is 10 from every nation, also taken from the prophet Zechariah chapter 8 and verse 23. It says, "In those days," meaning our day, 10 men from every language of the nations shall grasp the sleeve of a Jewish man, saying, "Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." This 10 men speaks of a righteous remnant in every language of the nations. It relates back to when Abraham interceded for Sodom and said, "If you find even 10 righteous men, will you not destroy the city?" We want to see a righteous remnant, at least 10 Christian pilgrims from every nation, including your nation, coming up to this year's Feast of Tabernacles because you recognize the centrality of Israel and the Jewish people in God's salvation plan for the whole world and His special plans and purposes for the city of Jerusalem in our day. We want to see a righteous remnant, at least 10 from your nation, at this year's Feast of Tabernacles. Come and join us in October.